Good afternoon and good morning to our lovely Natalie Thomas. I'm so delighted you're joining us today, Natalie. You are the Director of Strategy at The Good, who are a leading consulting agency who support businesses to harness user insights and really unlock digital improvements to that whole digital experience to drive ultimately conversion and revenue. So welcome to the B2B podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
I wanted just to start off by asking you a little bit about your background. Obviously, your role at The Good involves leading teams, some of the world's leading brands. You know, you've got like Adobe, The Telegraph, through the Good digital experience optimization program, and that includes everything from research, strategy, and growth expertise, ultimately to drive revenue. But it's still the case that conversion rate optimization, or as you guys rightly call it, digital optimization, digital experience optimization, is new. How did you get into the space?
Good question. Well, I think, one thing about optimization that I love and that's refreshing for me is I get to have conversations with people every day from really different backgrounds. You'll meet people who come from human-computer interaction or marketing, psychology backgrounds. For me, I guess I really started in customer service. Like a lot of people, I had to pay my own way through school. So I worked primarily in specialty coffee at first, and if you've ever worked in specialty coffee, you know that every day is a lesson in optimization. Signage tells people where to stand and where to order, where to queue, and then of course we always have people experimenting with language, trying to be efficient and pleasant but direct to help people get what they need in a timely manner. So while I was in school, I was working in coffee and I was studying product design. And so my degree is in industrial design. I would say, if folks are unfamiliar with that, that is the user experience of physical goods. So at the foundations of industrial design, some of the quote unquote greats would have been designing trains or cars. But for me, I really found my specialty there. A lot of folks go to product design school and then find that they're interested in, say, textiles or physical goods, home goods. They might go into furniture design. For me, I really fell in love with user experience. And in particular, one class from our professor, Sam Rock, who was at the time head of UX at a little startup called Dollar Shave Cup, but had also worked agency side, introduced us to experiments we had run for Taco Bell, and that really opened my eyes to the business case for user experience design.
So can you tell us a bit more? I mean, the two examples that you just gave there are ones that are all very relatable to us as consumers. You mentioned about Taco Bell. What kind of stuff were they doing that really inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like day one of class, literally, just Sam showing us his portfolio. And one of the ones that stood out is what I refer to now as the taco test, because it was really a spark moment for me. At the time, they were working on a website that was kind of inspired by Instagram. They were trying to make a website that felt very relatable, maybe less formal. They wanted images of food that looked maybe a little bit more messy or handheld, similar to the way that your friends might post them on Instagram. And they ran an experiment, and you can actually go to the website still. It's ta.co. We'll redirect you to tacobell.com. But they ran an experiment in the customizer. So if you were buying a taco or a burrito, they tested in the purchase experience whether a drop down for add-ons would be better. So you maybe have like your sort of standard offering, and then if you wanted to add extra hot sauce or sour cream, they tested a drop down for that versus a sort of more visual spread where everything was organized by like the topping type, whether it's sauces or proteins. And they found that in the drop down version, folks were more direct. They were quicker to add their add-ons and then proceed to the next step on their purchase journey. But in the sort of more visual orientation, the way that the website still is today, folks purchase more. The average order value went up. And so it's maybe less efficient, but maybe a little bit more fun and ultimately more valuable to the company. So that really opened my eyes to just the opportunity, the business case for user experience. I think especially coming from industrial design, we learned so much about the user-centered approach, and we learn to be advocates for the users. But then hearing sort of why businesses might buy in, I think you really need both sides of the story to advocate for that work. So that was my introduction into experimentation, and sort of the rest is history.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about what you said there and how that translates into the B2B space, because, and I guess this might be some of the reasoning why you've moved away from the term CRO, or conversion rate optimization, into digital experience optimization, because ultimately, if you looked at the test that was run, first answers that you are going to get from that experiment is, well, we get more customers when the drop down's available. And if you were in B2B, where there's a much longer sales cycle, you might get all excited by that and go, oh yeah, we're getting way more MQLs or SQLs, whatever you're classing them as when they hit the website, when we do this. Let's switch everything across to that. But that ultimately wasn't the thing that led to more revenue, because by waiting that little bit longer, and again, thinking about B2B with the long sales cycle, I mean, like, it could be 3 months, it could be 3 years. You've got to take into account the bigger picture, and it has to be about what's going to not just drive more of those instantaneous conversions, but the most valuable conversions. And I suppose that's something that you're working with your clients on a lot.
Oh, for sure. We hear a lot from our B2B clients that like MQLs or BS, all we care about is SQLs. The quality of a lead really matters. And so if there's something you can do in your experience to improve the quality of a lead, that's definitely something to pay attention to as well. You mentioned the lead time. Anytime we start a B2B relationship, we start with subject matter experts, and we just interview folks who are on the other side of that purchase journey, because that lead time really is different. And I think it's understandable to understand why folks want to take so much from that B2C or e-commerce sort of conversion rate optimization discipline, because the time to value is really strong, the attribution is really good. We don't have that luxury though in B2B. So there's a lot of other stuff that needs to be stood up along the way in order to make it meaningful. But I also find that the constraints can be inspiring as well. So for instance, if you have samples in your product cycle, maybe you're selling swatches to like wholesalers or retailers who are going to then use them on their furniture, or potentially use them in their applications for like architecture. That if we can attribute how many folks get a sample, like a percent conversion to that, then we can sort of do a little bit of calculation upstream, and we know what the value is of getting more samples in folks' hands. So potentially we're lengthening the lead time, but we're also ensuring that that bucket is getting filled, so that that mid funnel is really strong. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in B2B that we don't get to play with in B2C, which makes it a really interesting space for me.
Yeah, so that's going to segue nicely into another question I was going to ask you, because obviously the Good have a real range of clients. You do have a lot of the B2C brands that we would recognize and know, but also a number of B2B brands. B2C is traditionally seen as way more advanced than their B2B colleagues. So, us sitting there with our smaller marketing budgets, how do you see us harnessing CRO effectively? I mean, at all stages of the funnel?
Yeah, good question. I think the first is just data foundations, and I feel like I'll just always keep coming back to that, really understanding the potential. I think for teams, it's easy to see sort of like the new shiny object, especially if you're working. I respond directly to a founder. I'm number 2. And so my boss is an entrepreneur, and he tends to see an opportunity and want to go for it. And I think if you're a B2B marketer, it's really easy to hear, the highest paid person in the room's opinions. And if CRO is that thing right now, and everybody feels like that's the new opportunity that's going to get them the biggest leads, they want to go for it. But let's first do some opportunity sizing, right? And make sure that that's the direction that we need to go. So first off is just make sure you ask yourself whether or not this is the right opportunity for you. But once you are sort of aware of like what opportunity you might be able to unlock, and I think a really realistic range is like, okay, what if we increased our conversion rates by 5%? What if we increased our samples by 5%. 5% is a really attainable number. And of course, there are a number of factors that go into conversion rates. It's not all in the hands of optimization specialists. We can only tweak so many factors on the website to improve the experience. We can't control for factors like consumer sentiment, macro and microeconomics, how people are talking about you on social media, right? But ultimately, there's a lot that you can do. And so opportunity sizing and then just really understanding where the value of a lead is, and both mid funnel and bottom of funnel. It's a great place to start. And it's all about knowing your audience and your constraints. Like I said, B2C is, sort of blue ocean. There's so much that can be done, and the attribution is really clear and correct. I know it's a little murkier in B2B, but understanding your constraints really set you up. Maybe there's areas of the site that you strictly cannot optimize, like blog pages, for instance. They'll need to top of funnel sometimes, and they're for people that are just at the beginning of starting to explore. And we even see that in the B2C space, like blog pages will convert at 0.06%. And we get a lot of folks who are like, we put so much work into optimizing these for search engines. Let's make sure that they convert really well. And my response to that is, well, even 1,000% increase on the effectiveness of this page would still only get you a few more leads. So let's start our
Yeah. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I think you've got to work out where you're focusing your energies. And I mean, I guess once you've decided that CRO is right for you, then it's also a case of like, what do you do within CRO? Because there are so many different opportunities for you. And thinking about it under that lens, are there certain types of B2B organizations that are better placed to invest in a CRO program?
Probably doesn't surprise you that we have data on that. So we ran a survey toward the end of 2024, kind of like turn of the year there. Really interesting time to run surveys because a lot of people are just trying to buy time until the end of the holidays. So we were like, hey, if you need a few clicks to click, take our survey, and we got a great response rate there. So we surveyed several hundreds of leaders about, from a number of industries too. So B2B is represented, but also e-com. We heard a lot from people who are in media companies, surprisingly, and they're from all over the world, although a large portion of them are from the United States. And what we found is that the folks who were doing the best, and we measured best by exceeded their revenue goals for the previous complete year, so 2024, and had high NPS scores, if they were measuring them. Not everybody is. They had 5 factors in common. And I can briefly go through all of them. There's a lot more information online. But the first was just those data foundations. That's sort of that opportunity sizing issue, but also just we heard that a lot of folks had issues with data hygiene, the trustworthiness, or that it wasn't accessible. Maybe some of your data is in Tableau and that's accessible, but the rest of it is hidden in a spreadsheet that only the CMO has access to, right? So data foundations was a big one. If they have great data foundations, accessible, hygienic, ready to use, then that was a good start. We also heard from the high-performing companies that they had a user-centered approach. So that both means that data-backed understanding of their customers, so understanding their entry channels, what devices they're using when they're visiting the site, what landing pages they're coming from. But it also meant they had a comprehensive roadmap of opportunities that was based on real user research. So it wasn't just their ideas. What are we going to do to optimize the site? They're taking up those foundational practices and they're turning them into a user-centered process. So number 2 is that user-centered approach. Number 3, a lot of folks struggled with that, and I think that's where an agency can be a really awesome resource, because what we heard is that most folks have less than 5 hours a week from disciplines like development, design, things like that. So resourcing was one big opportunity. And then we also heard that they need to have a toolkit. So do you have a practice for prioritization? Do you have a place where everyone can go to get buy-in on the roadmap? Are you doing experimentation? Those are the tactics mostly that we talk about. And then finally, they're building buy-in. So the big factor is just, can you show people what outcomes you're getting of this work and get them really excited about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I think the first point really struck home with me is that, like, you can't really start on an effective CRO journey without data. Like, you need to have insight, you need to have data you can make decisions based on. You need to have something to inform your initial experimentation, or else it's all just, I mean, obviously there is an ideation process and we can all have lots of creative ideas about things that might or might not work, but without having at least, like, I mean, even if you start off with really good analytics data and then add qualitative data to that, you've got a great starting point. But if you haven't got a good foundation basis for data, then you should probably go, are you saying you should spend the time collecting that first before you start your program?
Yeah, it's partially about collecting it, partially about hygiene. One thing I know from seeing hundreds of data properties is there's no such thing as clean data. So, we do what we can. And I would also caution that the information that we need as optimization specialists is not the same as maybe a marketing specialist would. So we don't use the exact same dashboards. We're using like a smaller subset of data, I would say. And it's more about who's entering the site and who's moving, or product for that matter, and who's moving through the funnel, and then where are they kind of dropping off. So we want to be really context aware, which is why we're hyper concerned about like landing pages and device types. And, if they're coming in with one concern versus another, you can learn that from understanding channel acquisition. So it's not a huge list and there's nothing that's perfect, but we talk about like decision-driven design, decision-driven optimization. We just need to be able to make a decision and move forward. The data doesn't have to be perfect, but a lot of folks do struggle with hygiene and accessibility. So if you can sort of bump up the level of where those are at, that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, and you obviously mentioned that where you're providing support is both, I guess, at the very front end on the website, which is traditionally where a lot of people will focus CRO energies, but also right into the product as well. Do you see better quality data being available in product?
Often we find that they're just totally different teams, and that marketing tends to be in charge of acquisition, and that kind of ends at the point of like getting a lead, getting a registration, getting a sales call. And then there's some other team typically that's in charge of product, or maybe it's the same team, but they report to a slightly different manager. So is the data better? It's different. I think there's a lot more caution in product because no one wants to upset existing customers. So we're often testing things with new users before we roll them out. So we'll test them, kind of get proof of concept with new users. And then for existing customers who might have used this feature the same way for 5-10 years in some cases, we want to just sort of de-risk it and say, like, will you be less happy? A lot of folks don't like change, but if we can make sure that they will navigate through it and that we're not encouraging or increasing frustration too much, and that the learning curve is sort of like swift, that they'll get over the hump really fast of whatever the new changes are. That's kind of our main focus there. So the data tends to be different, I would say.
Yeah, and just cycling back on the website, I think, our experience is that in B2B, there's still this, which I find really dated, this view of, right, we're doing a new website. Whereas in B2C, that the website you don't rebuild, you iterate and you develop and you improve experience. And actually I was talking to one of our clients the other day who said to me, right, we've added someone on UX to our team and we're going to be slowly working through the website, looking at where we can make changes. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's so refreshing, because in B2B, you get certainly at the front end, a new CMO in, or somebody who's leading that marketing team, and the first thing they do is, right, and for me, that feels like such a big mistake, because how do you know if it doesn't work? How do you know what doesn't work? Equally, if that changes everything, how do you know what it was that made the improvements? I mean, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could say so much about that, but I'll try to keep it brief. First of all, we get a lot of our clients from them having done a redesign, seeing their conversion rates drop, and then they immediately find out about what conversion rate optimization is, and they come to us. And so it's a little bit harder to do it in post. We use things like the Wayback Machine and any tools that were previously installed. We look at analytics pre and post. We're trying to sort of together the pieces of like, okay, what was the crime that occurred against this website? And oftentimes we are able to attribute it to like one specific change or one specific decision that was made. I think rebrands are really tricky unless you are really struggling as a brand. Most people don't need rebrands. Most people don't need an entirely new website. Maybe you have technical debt, a very good reason to sort of like consider either replatforming or updating. But most of the time, we don't need a full design overhaul. I've seen very few sites where burning it down is my recommendation, and at times we'll say that, but most of the time it's not right. I also think that it is dangerous to hire a new, let's call it a CMO, because they're typically in charge of the website, right? Like ultimately people report up to them. I think I wouldn't have designed it that way if it were me, but I'm coming from a design discipline. But if you start hiring new leads, who every time you hire a new lead gets on the site and just throw out everything we did last year and do something completely different, that's a really dangerous cycle of just burning energy to burn energy and not really evaluating the feedback there. So that's why the last factor in our 5 factors is impact and buy. And part of what we do for all of our clients is we, from the beginning of the relationship, build a dashboard. Every research project is tied to the insights that came out of it. And then if there's a test that we're building or another experiment, some kind of validation that we're getting on the changes that we recommend out of that, we then relate it back to that research piece. So there's nothing that happens on the site where we can say, here's the research. This is where it came from that we made, and here's attributable wins that you have out of that. And I think this is also helpful for anyone who has a growing team. But in our situation, as what we've seen is that often we get a new project onto our client side lead. Maybe they replace someone, or maybe someone gets a new ops, and they come to us, hey, put together a little list of everything you've ever done for me, and tell me what impact it's had on the company. And it used to be that we would have to, dig out slide decks and put together everything in sort of like a 1,000-page deck for them or something with a, a large appendix, the high level stuff. And that's what the thing is, look, it's all in the dashboard. It's right there. It's how we made that decision and how it improved the experience for your users and your bottom line. So combined in like a visible, accessible at will dashboard is a really good way to stop yourself from those bits and starts of we had a new person and they have a new opinion, so we're just going to totally redirect the whole direction of the website.
Yeah, it's such a drain on resource as well. To take a whole team because oftentimes it does involve a whole team, to redo something where iteration and development and being more agile and just saying, okay, let's do it a bit at a time would be much more effective in terms of use of their time. So yeah, we're in agreement on that one.
Yeah.
So thinking of again B2B, can you share some of the examples that you've had where you've really seen success in that B2B digital optimization space?
Yeah, I mean, just to name a few, I think we mentioned samples earlier, and that can be a big part of the B2B journey. So we've used it in, let's say, industrial-sized planters. If you're building out either an office building or an outdoor dining area and you're ordering thousands of dollars worth of planters, swatch color, shine, sheen, those are all really important decisions that I would say any interior architect is going to be really picky about. So increasing the number of swatches that get in folks' hands, again, that's one of those things that could increase lead time, but it could decrease return rates, increase customer satisfaction, and increase attributable leads. So that's been a big one in that space, as well as in a textile space, again, for interior architects. I also really, the number one thing that people think of, I think, in the B2B space is just driving leads, which is typically through a form on the website, but not always. And so driving leads through forms and then making sure that we're qualifying them ahead of time with the right content. So in cases like we worked with this client, My ID Care, and they offer breach protection. And so often that's one situation where the lead time is actually really swift. So if Target gets, their data gets hacked and they need to quickly offer identity protection, identity insurance for anyone whose information just got shared and they might be more prey to identity theft, they need protection really fast. And so that lead cycle is actually really quick. It's about making sure that they have the awareness that they need in order to have a qualifying conversation. And so that's another one where we were able to increase leads through forms in a way that's more attributable and maybe more in that classic sort of B2B sense based on the content that's on the page and making sure that their priming is done really well so that their needs are assured and their sort of apprehension is assuaged, because it can be a stressful time in someone's career to look for an alternative, look for a solution to assure that their customers don't come to them angry at the end of the day with their information having been breached. So
Yeah.
it can be as typical as a lead coming in through a form and optimizing that form by reducing form fields and adding priming, or it can be as nuanced as giving samples in a book and then waiting 3 months for that to try to use it.
Yeah, well, it all comes back to the data, doesn't it? Because like you said, there is the client you mentioned on the second example, which is, it's much more of not a distressed purchase, but something like, I need this now, I need to talk to someone, and now I need help. So that is taking them right the way through to the bottom of the funnel and getting that conversion. But equally, if you know that the sales cycle requires multiple touch points and you need to create those middle of the funnel transactions to warm up the buyer, then you focus your energies on creating as many of those as possible. So you're keeping alongside them on their consideration journey. So yeah, it totally makes sense. Really good examples. So I'm going to come back to the good now, because you guys are really pioneering in terms of the messaging that you are sharing with customers and potential customers around what we might have traditionally called conversion rate optimization, and moving more towards, I would describe as more thoughtful description, which is digital experience optimization. Can you tell us a bit more about that shift and how it came about, really?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, look, optimization is about more than a single metric. And I think if folks are selling optimization to their higher ups as a way to improve conversion rates, and they're saying that with 100% certainty they can improve conversion rates based on experimenting on the site, let's say, because that's what most people associate with optimization, I think they're setting themselves up for failure, because there are over 55 factors that influence their conversion rate. Some of those are in our direct control, like the messaging we use on the website, but some of them are totally out of our control. Like, what is the site speed of the end user? I have a client that has customers that are in rural environments, and we couldn't figure out why some conversion rates were really bad for certain populations. We realized, they have rural internet speeds. So some things are totally out of our control and we can factor for them. But if we're saying with 100% certainty increase conversion rates, like, I hope there's not, some big swift change in your industry that is out of your control. So in order to set expectations more clearly, we are steering away from saying the words conversion rate optimization, and we're steering more toward digital experience optimization. And I think that the opportunity there is to open the door toward some of the more soft benefits of the practice. Yes, we are ultimately looking at transaction volume, and we can split that a number of ways. Hopefully people are doing their analysis based on traffic and channel and, traffic quality. We've worked with clients who we do really great optimization for them, and then they hire a social media intern who gets them all this new traffic that has no intention of converting. And I hope that folks are sophisticated enough to know that doesn't devalue the work that's going on with the other teams, right? So rarely do I meet someone who has full control over every aspect of, like, who's coming into the account, who's coming into the website. They can control maybe how great the experience is on the site, but things like technical debt, word of mouth, macroeconomic trends, there's so many things that impact conversion rate. So what I would say is, simply running an A/B test or a few here and there and calling that CRO and hoping your conversion rates improve is not a good plan for success. And with digital experience optimization, we are hoping that our clients expect honestly a lot more from the program. So, that could be customer satisfaction, that could be decreasing abandonment, or even like improving the post-purchase experience. Often we do what we call a test purchase. And we just look at how's the packaging? Is there anything here that's going to help me get to my website again? What are the follow-up emails look like? We have some shorthands on our team for what a good experience is, and one of them is just a pizza tracker. Domino's was one of those companies that was one of the early online places you could order food, and they had a great system of telling you your order status called the pizza tracker. In the last year or so, we've since found out that information might have been fake, but it was really cool to see that someone was loading your pizza into the oven, right? Like, here's the status of it. So maybe if it's a lead generation, it's like, hey, so-and-so's read your inquiry. They're really excited to talk to you. Here's what's going to happen in your call. Sending reminder emails, giving a good summary or priming information ahead of time, sending links to articles that are relevant. Like, what can we do to make sure that experience post-submitting your order or post-submitting a form for a lead is really awesome? I would say that's not conversion rate optimization, right? Like, we've already made the conversion, but is that less important to making the sale? Is that less important? Word of mouth is critical in these spaces. And so making sure that the follow through is there is really important. And what digital experience optimization gives us is the opportunity to look at things a little bit more holistically and appreciate not just the outcomes that we're getting, which of course are awesome, but also appreciate the nuance that comes with building an amazing customer experience. So our clients really appreciate it, and they appreciate sort of that wider breadth that we bring to the table. You could hire someone to run a few tests for you, but I think the expectation of just experimenting on site will 100% increase conversion rate is setting us up for failure. And I'd rather see folks focus on holistically improving customer experiences without setting those false expectations.
Yeah, because I mean, the fact is that whatever you do, it's only ever an influencer. So from an attribution perspective, something had to get them there in the first place. That's the first point of influence. And then obviously there are loads of other influencing factors once they have made that transition through to like a lead or an MQL that we need to think about optimizing. Otherwise we're doing half a job. And I guess in a lot of ways, it might help your clients manage expectations internally in terms of, how fast you're going to see results, what kind of results you're going to get, like if you approach it in that way.
Yeah, fair. And I think those concerns get sort of assuaged the larger the company is that we work with. So the biggest companies we work with just want a nugget of an idea. Like, sometimes we're doing research for them that's so early, so high level that it won't get used for like an in-market or on-site test for 6 months. Like, oh, we want to do some research in Q2. We're going to run some tests on, this part of our form or checkout or this part of our product in Q4. If we can give them one nugget of an idea, that can unlock, $4 million in annual recurring revenue. So I think that attribution, obviously we all want perfect attribution, but if we all know we're heading in the right direction, it's like, that's what the data's for. Set our site in the right direction, set our strategy so that we're all aligned. And then, if we know that optimization is an opportunity for us, great. Something might point us in another direction and say, actually, we're going to expand existing relationships today. That doesn't mean we shouldn't all be focused on a great customer experience, but let's just set realistic expectations for what that means for us.
Yeah. And then you've got that longevity of your program as well, which if you make it unrealistic and you don't hit the expectations, it's like, well, it doesn't work. But of course it works. It's just, you've got to take time to find exactly what part of that away. It's a big process, but anything that you're doing that's continuous improvement is ultimately going to drive results at some point. So
for sure. I mean, I'm an optimization girly at my core. Like, you say lean manufacturing and I'm there right there with you. I will say I go deep in on this in an article called Benchmarks Are Bullshit. That talks a lot about the 55 factors that influence conversion rates and how some of them are within our control, some are not. We worked with someone who was a B2B fire suppressant gear sales. And so, California had the wettest year on history a few years ago, and that really changed the way that people were converting. And the the time period in which they needed to make a decision, and it changed budgets, right? So that's not within our control. But what we can control is, are they going to come to us next year when fires are blazing again, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. So a lot of our listeners, especially because they are all in B2B, that they're not, well advanced in their journey. Typically, they're at the very start of their, let's call it, digital experience optimization journey. Can you share with us some tactical research methods they might use to hit the ground running with that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, research methods is such a small part of the puzzle. I would almost say more like product methods. I think if everybody ran their team like a, high functioning digital property, things would be a lot better off in the world. We'd have a lot better experiences. So I guess I don't want to harp on this too much, but the first is I would just say, make sure you're doing your opportunity sizing. And that means not just should I, undertake optimization in my website, but what spaces are most important? And so the way that I would phrase that question is like, of the folks that convert on your website, what portion of them see this portion of the site? So if 100% of people see your navigation, then that might be a large opportunity for you. If 1% of people who convert see some ancillary page on the site, that's probably not impacting your conversion. So that's a oversimplification of the what I mean when I say opportunity sizing. But what we simply do is we run a calculation. Hey, if we increase conversion rates on this form or this page or this area of the site, maybe it's navigation, by 5%, and I think that's a good sort of realistic ballpark, what would that do for us? And you'll see that on some areas that maybe marketers are more concerned with, someone who's in an optimization discipline will tell you, it's actually not that important. Maybe that there are lower hanging fruit, and we can get to that later once we know we've kind of buttoned up these other areas of the site. I would also say, speaking to the 5 factors that we talked about earlier, it's hard to do if you don't already have a practice, but if you're building toward having a practice in your company of optimization, something that can really support you is just building that backlog of research questions and then what answers you get on them. So one of the things we asked in our survey, thegood.com/5 factors, the number 5, is, how often are you doing things like surveys? How often are you doing backlog analysis? How many experiments are you running per year? Are you talking to your customers? And often what we see is that it happens in fits and starts. So, one research initiative every 6 months does not a user-centered company make. So it's about in that cadence. And I would say once you start to catalog those in a place and sort of show the efficacy, that can be a great way to get buy-in for doing more. Everyone struggles with budgets, everyone struggles with resourcing, but building that buy-in with visibility is a great way to basically advocate to increase your budget and get more resources there. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So then final question, because we all want to learn more, and there aren't, hundreds and hundreds of resources out there for us marketers who really want to start optimizing that entire customer journey. But The Good have written a number of books on digital optimization, Behind the Click, opting into optimization. Would you recommend that these are a good place for marketers to start when they're exploring where next on their journey?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Behind the Click is our newest book, and it's by our founder, John, but it's based on conversations and case studies from our clients from the last, over a decade. It's a great way. It translates a lot of psychological principles into, more actionable steps that digital leaders can take. So I would say Behind the Click is a great place to start. We do have discounts for any podcast listeners. So if you go to thegood.com/BTC-podcast, you can get 50% off with the code BTCPodcast50. And it's a great, for on a digital copy especially, it's a great way that I like to have Siri read her to me and help me get through the really amazing, interesting concepts there in a way that just fits into my workday so seamlessly. But I would also say just sort of benchmarking yourself around, like, again, benchmarks are mostly bullshit, but we like to just look and make sure that we're not comparing conversion rates of our site to conversion rates of another site, but rather just comparing our practices and the practices of our clients to those of really high performing companies. So thegood.com/5 factors, the number 5, is a place to benchmark, just understand where you stand in terms of being able to build those foundational skills that lead toward that holistic digital experience optimization. So evaluating things like your toolkit, evaluating things like, are you getting good buy-in? And do you have the resources you need? It can also be a great way to make a case for, like, hey, we scored really low on resourcing. This might be a place that we need to invest if we want to be able to say for sure that we're actually optimizing this.
Yeah, makes sense. So a lot of great free resources, which is fantastic. Final question. I think I said my final question a minute ago, but this is my final question.
Okay, let's go.
Just where can our listeners contact you or the Good if they want to hear more about your services? Because, you know, this is something that we as B2B marketers need guidance, we need expertise and help on. So how should they reach your team?
Yeah, we're all very active on LinkedIn, but they can also email me, Natalie@thegood.com. On LinkedIn, I'm Natalie A. Thomas, and I'm very active there. So is John McDonald, our founder. We have strong opinions, loosely held, but either of those places are a great place to reach out.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And it was lovely to chat to you today.
You too. Thanks so much.